Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Monica's question and answer period. This is episode 3. Trying to sort of go along and do things in what I think is chronological order. We'll get to some current events and that sort of thing in upcoming segments. But one of the things I always get asked, being of full Italian heritage, how did I come out to my family? This is a really interesting question because most people think it must have been horrible. Macho Italians and, my experience was totally different. I think there's a lot of factors involved in that. First of all, Italians love family and they love their children, so that's working for you. The fact that I was fortunate enough to have a university education and, there wasn't much question about my sanity helped. I mean, my parents had a lot of respect for me. I was, at the time, 11 years into a career as a professional pharmacist. So, I understood healthcare. I understood dealing with people. I understood how to talk and manage people. So, I had those things working for me. On the downside was the fact that some cultures, and I'm going to say the Italian culture is probably, I couldn't speak for any other culture, obviously, but, there's always a concern about what other people think. What are people going to say? How are they going to deal with it? That kind of thing. So I had to consider all that when I addressed my family. And one of the things, the other thing about Italians is we're all very emotional. So one of the things I did was I wrote a letter to my family. I was like the queen of the letters at the time. I wrote a letter to my clients. I owned this little pharmacy in Elsa Craig. So, what's this town? 900 people. What are they going to do? So I wrote a letter to them explaining what was going on and explaining the medical facts about it. Same thing with my family. Um, you know, there's a whole list of questions or concerns that your loved ones will have for you. The first is, you know, are you going to get beat up and be dead in an alley somewhere? Are you going to be able to make a living? You know, what about afterwards? Like, are you going to date men? Are you going to date women? Like, what, so there's all these concerns, and they're legitimate concerns. And as a trans person going through it, you have to be very sympathetic to those concerns. You have to understand that, well, you're further along down the road, and some things that they say to you may be insulting. They're really grappling with it, and they're trying to, they love you. You always have to keep in the forefront of your mind that they do love you, and they're trying to get their head around it. So, I basically sat down, and it's a really funny story because I sat down with my parents. I told them I had a health condition to talk to them about, which wasn't really a lie. Gender dysphoria or being a transsexual is in medical textbooks. So, my mother, the consummate Italian mom, she doesn't ask you if you're coming for a day or 2 days. She asks you how many meals you're coming for. So I told her I'd, be there for 3. So she prepared my 3 favorites. And I get there and she wants to feed me. And, she brings me out a big platter of my favorite food. And I am just, I'm really nervous. I'm like, and then I just keep eating because if I stop eating, I'm going to have to talk to them. And plus, Dad, he wants to watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy anyway. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm eating, and I'm getting full, and I'm starting to sort of labor in breathing. And my mother says to me, let's go upstairs and get a coffee, and and then we'll come down and we'll have this talk that we're supposed to have. And I'm like, okay. So I get up the stairs, and after you've had a big meal, you're winded, you're breathing heavy, you're sort of stuffed, you're sort of, roly-poly me, right? And so I'm, labored breathing. And she says, "What's the matter?" I said, "Mom, it's nothing life-threatening, but it is life-changing." Okay. I'm trying to not worry her, but prepare her all at the same time, which is really an interesting dynamic. So we go downstairs, and on the way downstairs, she says, "Well, let your father watch Jeopardy, and then we'll talk." And we get downstairs, and he just starts asking me, "So what's the problem?" So clearly Jeopardy's out, and we start talking, and I start telling them this long dissertation about who I am, when I felt I was, I realized it. Um, a lot of facts. Basically, everything that I've told you in the first three blogs and then some. Vlogs. But anyway, and I look at my father, and it looks like it's going right over his head. He's just sort of got this glazed look, and he's looking at me, and he says, and all of a sudden, I'll never forget it, Double Jeopardy goes off on the television, which is playing in the background. And he looks at me and he says, "So when are you going to start living full time as a woman?" And I'm like, oh my gosh, he actually got it. I thought he was totally like, I was going to put him in a coma because he just seemed to be not absorbing anything. So, that was good. And then we had this long discussion, and I went through the details of how I would be transitioning. I hadn't had any set dates. It was sort of based on my community back home where I owned the pharmacy where my wife and I were working, and to transition to make it easier on everybody. So it was a good evening, and there was another funny moment when for years, I had at Halloween gone away and lived for, a prolonged period of time as a woman. So that was my sort of vacation every year. And every year I got photo documentation. So I have a photo shoot, so I could track my progression. So I showed him this album I had, and he flipped through the pictures, and he said, "So why do you have pictures of your oldest sister Janice in here?" And I said, "Dad, that's me." So I realized that I guess I look a lot like my older sister Janice. Everybody tells me how much my daughters look like me. I don't see it. I think that's the same for everybody. So that's the one validation I'll take, is I must look like my oldest sister Janice. And I always thought Janice was very pretty, so that's a good thing, and I'm going to stick with that. So then, the rest of the family, there were some casualties. My sisters were supportive, my brother not so much, but all in all, it was really good. The advice I could give to anybody is be honest, be proud, be willing to allow people to absorb it. Don't, you can't go in there and say, "It's my right to do this, so I'm going to do it." You have to sort of play a bit political and give people a chance to breathe. There's usually a shock factor. Believe it or not, my in-laws, my father-in-law sort of stopped talking to me. I think he was pretty convinced this was just an excuse for me to go out and have an affair. Everybody looks at it from their own paradigm. He was the consummate heterosexual, so I must be wanting to sleep with some other woman. Later on, we resumed our friendship, and to the day he died, we were pretty close friends, and I'm still fairly close with my ex-mother-in-law. So you have to give people a time to absorb the shock, to get it straight in their head, and to come back around to you. You can't demand anything quickly or in the short term, and you can't be afraid. If you're afraid, people sense it. I always use the analogy of a dog sensing when there's fear and attacking because of it. You can't be afraid, but you can't be in people's face. You have to find that place, and it's going to be different with different families that you have to talk to, or different people you have to talk to, because it's a dynamic process, and every day that goes on in our history changes. Um, Nowadays, I go home, and you know, I'm sort of like a rock star. Like people like to be around me. My cousin, I was at my cousin's son's wedding last fall, and she told me that when I came out, all the girls in the family were upset because I was so hot. Who knew that? I was just trying to fit in. Um, so it's all for the most part healed. But when you tell your family, you are going to inevitably be inflicting a wound, and it needs time to heal. So, and everybody's at a different place in time. I had a friend of mine who I played in a band with when I was 16 years old, and she called me and she said, "My son has just come out to me. He says he's a woman." He was 13 years old. Clearly, he didn't have to play the game that I did. But that's a function of time and family, and culture. So everybody's going to be a little different. I was very little help to her. I mean, she appreciated my counsel, whatever it was, but I mean, in her daughter's case now, um, there are more facilities in place. There are more clinics. Um, Schools are more understanding. Heck, if I would have come out in high school in my day, I'd have been dead somewhere. Like, it just wasn't that way. So hopefully every day it gets better, and hopefully, if you're struggling with um, coming out to family, hopefully your family's open minded. Don't assume they are or they aren't. You never really can tell, but just be prepared to be strong, be proud, be humble, and be truthful. And I think, you have to let the chips fall where they may. There's a saying in sports. I'm an avid football fan, and I listen to football talk all the time. And players will say, all I can do is be the best I can be. And where that fits on the team or the scheme, that's a whole other question. All I can control is who I am and how I handle myself. And those are great words of advice. All you can do is be the best you can be. And if your family chooses to not accept you initially, I wouldn't write them off. Like I say, the wounds take time to heal. Everybody takes a little bit more time. But give them a chance, and I wish you best of luck, because when you have your family support, there's nothing better and nothing more important to ensuring that your road's a lot smoother than it otherwise could be. So you can catch more of me on at monicamiatello.com. So MONICAMIATELLO at gmail or .com. And sorry, I was going to give you my email address. I don't think you want that. And I'm on Twitter at transmoxie or at transmoxie. I'm so bad with this social media stuff, but I'll get better. I'm sure I'll get better. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I love to listen to your questions, and I try to answer them the best I can and as honestly as I can. And I hope you continue to follow. I think it's good for all of us. Take care and have a great day.